Okay.
Are we ready to go, Ms. Moore?
Yes, we're ready.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is John Belamowitz, and it is 10:02 a.m. and I'm going to call the meeting of the TSBEP to order. We'll begin by calling the roll. Dr. Ronald Palomares.
Present.
Mr. Adler.
Here.
John Belamowitz, I'm here. Mr. Bridges.
Here.
Dr. Fletcher.
I'm here.
Dr. Becker.
Here.
Dr. Calhoun.
Here.
Dr. Singh. I feel like was Dr. Singh here earlier?
Yeah, she's here. I'll meet your mic.
Here, I'm here.
There we
I
go.
had it on mute.
There we go. And Mr. Zaguris.
Here.
Very good. Well, welcome to all of you. Thank you all for being here. First thing on the agenda is we're going to go into public comment. It's limited to 3 minutes. We'll try to give you a 30-second warning. And do we have anybody lined up for public comment yet, Ms. Moore?
I don't see any right now. If the public has a comment, you can raise your hand. Okay, we have one. One moment. Tara?
Just one?
Wait, yes.
Tara.
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 Tara. All right, thank you. You have a public comment?
I do. It's really quick. Thank you guys, as always. For those that you know me, I've been coming to these meetings since March of 2019. For those that don't, my name's Tara Coronado. The reason I was reaching out today was I'm really concerned about BHEC's decision to redact complaint numbers. I opened a open records request to find out why it's happening. In the past, there were 11 numbers. Numbers are now only being given out in sections of 9. And that's important for those of us that are trying to track the clusters of complaints. If you'll look at the packet you guys gave out today on page 11, the full complaint number is provided, but then when you get to page 75, you've gone to the 9-digit format, which does not allow the public to in any way, shape, or form track the complaints. And that's worrisome because of the clusters. And it's also worrisome because as I was reading the rest of your packet and you get to issues that are subject to, hold on, the online derogatory remarks part, which is the 7th bullet point when you get down into guidelines for using social media. I feel like the blog that I have presented to you guys in the past violates that. De facto per se is a violation, but because when you start redacting the complaint numbers, I have no way of knowing if you've opened up a complaint to look into any of these things that are statutory violations. You guys have a responsibility to investigate clusters, but when you redact the complaint numbers, the public doesn't have any idea what complaint goes where or how to track it. So I just wanted to make sure that you're all aware that is happening. I will send the open records request to the Attorney General and hopefully get some traction there. But I've attended your meetings and I'm unclear when that was done, how it was done, why it was done. But the lack of transparency is going the wrong direction. You know, like redacting numbers is hiding and shielding issues from the public. So again, I want to thank you guys always for your time, but that is a huge issue. The decision to redact complaint numbers so the public can't track what you guys are doing.
And can we get your full name for the record, please? I'm not sure if we got that. And
It's Tara Coronado.
thank you. I just wanted to get it
Come
on
to
there.
every meeting.
I know. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Okay, we do have one more public comment from Kenda Rimple. One moment.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to remind this board that in accordance with Texas Occupations Code, section 507.205, subsection A, complaints and investigations and all matters related to those are confidential by statute. They are not to be released by discovery or any means of legal compulsion. What this means is that information regarding complaints as they are filed are confidential. They only become public once there has been some sort of final resolution. I'm sure you all are aware of that, but I think that given goes to, it bears repeating. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dalrymple.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised, and there are no callers by phone.
Very good. All right, so we'll move on to item number 3, approval of minutes. Have y'all had a chance to review? Are there any corrections, or if not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Been moved by Mr. Zaguris. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved by Mr. Zaguris and seconded by Mr. Bridges to approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The motion carries. Thank you for approving the minutes. We'll move on to the chair's report. I don't have a whole lot to discuss. Again, we've talked about Zoom versus in person. It is my desire to get back in person soon as restrictions are being lifted. And it does seem in many places that the COVID virus is subsiding. I know that's not universal. There are some cases of uptick, but I do think we're getting to the point where we should be thinking about getting back together in person. The problem, though, actually has less to do with COVID and more to do with the real estate issues, that in terms of moving the agency and having an actual place for us to meet seems to be kind of the biggest restriction here. So I just wanted to put it out there that I'm looking forward to getting back in person. I think at least the next meeting will be on Zoom. I want to revisit it then to see what our options are, but open to any discussion for or against that idea from the board. But I just wanted to let you guys know where my head was on that. So any thoughts?
I do have a thought.
Yes, sir.
I do have a thought.
Unmute your mic, please, Mr. Adler.
What's the main advantage or benefit to doing in person as opposed to from Zoom? I can say from my perspective, it's much less disruption on my personal schedule. And if, so I'm just wondering what you feel would be the main advantage of getting back in person.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there have definitely been unforeseen advantages by getting it, doing it through Zoom. We had a difficult time broadcasting these to the public before. I think the fact that we have this now, and if we can figure out the logistics of some sort of hybrid model that allow for participation via Zoom, I don't know, and it's probably not the proper time to go into the legal of some hybrid model where we have in person versus in Zoom, to where if a board member wanted to remote in, if they could, I think that can be done. I'd want to talk offline to confirm that can be done. So I think there's been a great advantage by getting the public to be able to see these. I think open government is good government. And, this has definitely created a new sense of openness to where somebody who wanted to see what we were doing didn't have to, wreck their day and come to Austin. But the other point of it is that we are a government agency. The seat of government is Austin. And I think that's where business is essentially designed to be conducted. So I think that with the goal of getting back in person and in Austin would be good. Your point's well taken on the advantages of Zoom and being able to remote in.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
If I may, on that
Please.
point as well, I just wanted to underscore, because it bears repeating, even if we're still meeting in Austin down the road, continuing to allow for public comment via Zoom, even if we're all together, just because I think the level of access that the general public has had to our meetings over the past year has been one of the real positives that's come out of this. So I would encourage us to continue looking at that as a option.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges.
I have something to say.
Yes, ma'am.
Because of the, it's not end of the pandemic yet, and because many people either don't take or cannot take the vaccine, I don't think we're ready for a completely on-site meeting. There should be hybrid model for those who wish to be joining through Zoom, because by coming to Austin means you have to spend night in the hotel. And I personally am not ready to do that yet. So until things are really pretty safe, because I cannot take a vaccine, I reacted to flu vaccine really bad. And so I would, until it's safe enough to go stay in a hotel and travel and eat in restaurants and so forth for myself, I would like to be connecting through Zoom. So we're doing, in other places, we're still doing hybrid models or completely Zoom. Some places we're doing Zoom completely, but at our university, for example, we have open to maybe possible hybrid models. And that I think should be a consideration and good way to try, kind of move into the full presence model when things get really good. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Singh. I appreciate all the comments on the hybrid idea. We'll look into that and we'll see where we end up. Thank you. Any other discussion on that? All right, hearing none, moving on to the board administrator report. Ms. Moore.
Okay, hello. The first item is the council report for the second quarter performance measures, and that's in the packet. This is there for your review. I don't know if anyone wanted to talk about any items, but it's just there for reference. All right. The second item would be.
Ms. Moore,
Sure. Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
On page 5 of your report, I think the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council's second quarter measures fiscal year 2021. Am I reading this correctly? As I look through the licensees on the left side, it says LSSP, LIC, LPA, LPC, and so on. Is the LIC, is that for the licensed psychologist, or is licensed psychologist somewhere else?
Which one again? I'm sorry.
This is on page 10 of the PDF.
Okay, give me 1 second.
And I believe it's page 6 within that report.
Ron, the LIC between LPA and LSSP is licensed psychologist.
Okay.
Okay. That's what I kind of thought, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
And so that's
Yeah.
the designation for the licensed psychologist. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in our calculations, that's how we refer to it.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Good. All right. The next item is referencing Bill 7105, which is related to expansion of the pilot program for the VA system. And this expansion will allow the use of contracted VA health professionals, including psychologists, to perform telehealth to clients across jurisdictions. And then just noting that in Ohio, they are cracking down on emotional support animals. It started with Department of Transportation, people trying to use, larger animals as part of that. So what they did was work with the veterinary board in Ohio to draft requirements for ESA letters. And in their recommendation, it lists any animal of any size. So basically they have it where A letters should come from state licensed practitioners are the only ones that would be acceptable for using with the Department of Transportation. And it'll have to be renewed annually. And they report that the accountability is already working in their state.
Very good.
Under the SIPAC, there are now 21 states with enacted legislation, 5 of which will become enacted in June or July of this year. The SIPAC has enabled an online public search for psychologists who hold the license with the compact. And they did ask that jurisdictions include a link on their websites for consumers to use. So is the board okay with adding that link to our website?
Do you need an action for that, or are we good? If
No,
we
I
just-
hope y'all are okay because I've already got it on there.
Good.
So if you're
Yeah,
not,
that-
you
that
better
sounds
tell me
good.
now so I can take it off.
No, I'm in favor of more
I
information.
didn't think it'd be an issue. Okay.
Thank you.
And under the ASPPB update, we have the group had created a form for licensure boards to verify persons that were eligible for CPQ, which is Certification of Professionals Qualifications, as entry point into the profession. Those that no longer had access to their supervision documentation at the time when they're applying, because either the state lost it or the person is deceased. So it's a document that the state boards would verify that these documents existed prior when they initially applied for a license, but they're not available at the time that they're seeking a license in those states. So it's a way for, it's an affidavit that state boards would fill out, and the form shows the different levels of supervision, the type of supervision that they're providing the affidavit for.
Hey, Diane,
Yes,
I want to interrupt you for just a second and back up to SIPAC for a second.
okay.
Patrick, do we have, I think she said something about 20 something states. Do we have, is that number still accurate since this information was given to us?
Yeah, 21 are joined.
21?
There's legislation pending in 11 more. So we're hoping to get up to 32 here
Okay.
soon. But
30. Okay, I guess that's the number I had stuck in my head was the 30.
right, there's 11 with pending legislation that hasn't been enacted, but it's possible to get up there. Yeah.
If y'all have looked at the map lately of jurisdictions that are considering or where SIPAC stands a good chance, you're beginning to see a trend. The two coasts aren't taking part in it, but Middle America is. And I think you're going to see a pretty significant, it's going to be a strange thing because your bi-coastal areas, they don't seem to be as interested in it. Northeast, and in particular California, they're running into trouble trying to get them to participate in SIPAC, but the rest of the nation seems to be pretty interested in it. Now, I was in an LPC board meeting last Friday, so Diane sat in on the California Telepsychology committee meeting where they were considering SIPAC. Dan, you want to just kind of give them a brief update of what you heard in that?
Sure. Some of their concerns were the way that their psychologists are licensed isn't the same how other states' requirements. So that was one of their main concerns. And then also they had an issue with the SIPAC not sharing the revenue from those states that are joining, because I guess they're looking for their boards to generate revenue. So how are they going to do that with other states just joining the compact and so forth? And then they were concerned with the staff involvement. It would take away resources from their day-to-day to manage operations that's required for the SIPAC. But the committee's recommendation to their full board was to not support the legislation to move forward with the compact. They're not ready to do that at this time.
It was I didn't watch it, but I got Diane's report, and I've read a lot of the comments that were submitted in anticipation of that committee meeting. I'll tell you, it's frustrating from my perspective, given how many emails and communications we receive from California psychologists who have patients or clients here.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be honest with y'all. I sent a letter to California. They solicited our input on how SIPAC is working. So I told them, I said, I think it's working very well. I now, thanks to SIPAC, we now have over 1,700 additional healthcare providers that can deliver services in Texas. Their view is, well, a SIPAC only allows for APA accredited people that have gone through APA accredited. I'm like, well, isn't it better to get a little bit of help than no help? And the approach we have taken here in Texas is, yeah, SIPAC's criteria doesn't match up with our own licensure law, but for the $6,000 we pay, I now have 1,700 other healthcare providers that can deliver services to my folks. So that's a pretty good deal, in my opinion. And it's only going to get better as time goes on. So you're seeing, this is where you're seeing the differences between the jurisdictions here come out. I'll just be candid with you. The way California seems to be viewing it, it smacks of kind of the monopolistic or the protectionist mentality that we're seeing, federal law kind of move against now. What I'm afraid of is we're going to have a solidified division in that you're going to have California and then the Northeast who aren't participating in this, and then everybody else is, which, I guess that's fine. We're all our own little laboratories, and we all get to do what what our legislators tell us we can do. But at some point, what I'm kind of my fear, if this mentality continues to prevail, is the feds are going to get fed up with this, and they're going to say, we are sick and tired of having a fragmented licensure scheme throughout the country. We need people to be able to move back and forth easily and quickly between jurisdictions. We got a few key players that are fouling it up. Unfortunately, they're big key players between New York and California. That's problematic. And then you got Texas and hopefully Florida. We hopefully we'll be able to get Florida on board. That'll be awesome if we can get Texas and Florida on board. You talk about two competing laboratories. You got two different schools of thought there. We'll see who wins that one, which I'm pretty sure we're going to come out on top on that one. But anyway, guys, I'm just giving you a heads up. I think Texas has made the right call in going this way, but we're hitting some walls with different schools of thought on this. But anyway, that's just, now I'll get off the stump and shut up.
Well, actually, can I put you back on the stump for a second?
Okay.
That was going to be my question, is what is the repercussion overall if a state like California does not get on this trend, and what does it mean for the rest of us, because it is fragmented. So my expectation is that the Association for Psychologists in California are working hard on behalf of the licensees to be able to make some changes on that. What else, just so that we have knowledge, where's the other pockets of groups that are trying to assist with that?
Well, I think part of the problem is when you read the comments, and they're publicly available, you can download them. You will find that a lot of the associations there in California are opposed to SIPAC because they complain about they phrase it in terms of lack of diversity and inclusiveness because it only allows APA accredited programs. That's how they're framing their argument.
Okay.
And so they seem to be opposed to it, the groups. I think it was basically me and one other individual is the only one that kind of commented in support of SIPAC, and everybody else seemed to be opposed to it. What does that mean? That means that for folks coming from California, your life isn't going to get any easier. And for our folks who have patients that go out there and need to be treated, they're going to have to get licensed in California. It's the same old, same old. It's the exact same thing that's made everybody mad now during the pandemic, is the lack of portability between jurisdictions. And what my fear is like I said, is that the federal government's going to get tired of this. Now, to some degree, I'm not sure what they can do because of I think it's the 10th Amendment that basically states retain exclusive authority over that type of stuff under the Constitution. But I can almost guarantee you, just like they do with federal highway funds, they can probably say, well, if you take Medicaid dollars, we're going to put this hook in it that you now have to, accept portability from other states. I can guarantee you there's some way, shape, or form that they can tie it into federal funds received and force it down our throats. Whereas the compact is something we all get to shape. We all get to vote on it. We send Patrick over there and we tell him that, look, this is how we want position we want to take. You don't get that if the feds tell us what to do. So that's kind of my fear. I don't want to lose that autonomy, if you will.
You went exactly where my head was going on it in terms of some sort of federal funding, which is essentially, I think, why Louisiana didn't get highway dollars for a while. It had to do with their drinking age, why roads are still playing catch up in Louisiana. Versus you don't need a sign to tell you when you leave Texas and you get into Louisiana most of the time. Judged by the asphalt.
So what's interesting to me is the online boards and the organizations versus some of the reality of licensure and what it means for people to actually practice. So if you would have taken this poll 5 years ago and said to trainees and to people trying to get licensed on other states, what are the 5 hardest states to get licensed in across the country? The answer would have been California, Texas, Florida, Massachusetts, and New York. And my guess is that probably lines up with the states that are either having difficulty or were campaigning really hard to get into SIPAC right up until now. And one of the challenges is that California has some difficulties or some differences in what is required to get licensed in the state of California that has nothing to do with APA requirements and everything to do with additional requirements for licensure that are within the curriculum of a program that are in addition to APA requirements that are required for every psychologist that are not required in other states. So if I were to go and try and get licensed in the state of California, I would have to take 2 additional courses, even though I've been licensed for 15 years. I would have to take those 2 additional courses because they were never in my curriculum to go get licensed in the state of California now. And so it's interesting to me that that is the gripe, is the APA requirements to go into SIPAC. With New York, it's something different. It has to do with, they have a higher requirement for the EPPP. With Massachusetts, they have other things. With Florida, they have other things. So it's interesting to me what sort of the organizational gripes are versus what the people and the barriers to actually being licensed are, that you hear from different people that are trying to move. And so I don't want to get too caught in the weeds about what the challenges are, because I think the bottom line is you're trying to look at the delivery of services to meet patient needs in areas that aren't being served. And there's sort of this political jockeying that's about money. And then there's the patient and the practice, differences that are happening, that some might be about a lobby, and some might be about public interest. And I don't know that all of those sides are being represented kind of in the discussions that we're having that might be on those boards, or that might be out there sort of for general consumption. So I think that there are lots of different sides to what are happening.
Dr. Becker, I'm curious to know, what are those 2 courses that you'll have to take? I'm just curious to know.
Human sexuality and diversity. Well, diversity is required everywhere, but it's a sexual abuse course that is specific to the state of California that they require.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this subject? Okay. All right, just moving forward with the ASPPB report. Modifications were made to the accreditation process. Those documents are in the packet for review. They basically made modifications to due process and notification of accrediting decisions. And also in your packet is the response to the article published in the American Psychologists newsletter regarding EPPP Part 2. And
Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Can I go back to the request from ASPPB about the review of qualifications?
Sure.
That form. So I sit on the ASPPB's mobility committee, which we review applications for the CPQ, the Certification in Professional Qualifications. The CPQ is something that allows for some level of mobility. Many states will accept that alone if you have your CPQ as meeting all the requirements for supervision, internship, training, academic work, and everything. But you have to be licensed for 5 years in a state before you can get the CPQ. And so it is a very nice mechanism for that mobility component to for the states that do accept it, including Texas that looks at that does accept it. What we've run into is every once in a while there are individuals who have been or had their original license in a state many years ago. We had one who just applied, and and all of the records were on microfiche. And the microfiche was unreadable. And so as part of the requirements for this is to demonstrate that they had their supervision by a licensed psychologist and they had so many hours of both internship and postdoc year. What we've come up is there's a number of individuals who just can't provide that documentation, and it's not because they didn't have it. Well, it could be because they didn't have it, but they couldn't find the documentation due to age. Individuals who could attest to it no longer are alive. The records that are kept by the licensing boards are unreadable or inaccessible or have been damaged. And so in those rare cases, what the board, what ASPPB is looking at for this in this document is to send, when all those other avenues have been expended and they're not able to obtain that documentation, is to reach out to the board administrators and ask, at the time that this individual was licensed, so were they, did they attend, was your board licensing requirement for internship to be so many hours, have licensed psychologists, did you verify these things? And so it's more of, if they did get licensed at that point, the assumption is they've met all those requirements when you cannot obtain the documentation. And that's really what that document is asking for, is just looking at that, asking for, in those rare cases when there's no way to obtain true documentation of the facts of what their training was like when they were licensed, can we get a board administrator to sign off on it saying, yes, at that point of licensure, when they applied in that year, these were the requirements for licensure. So therefore, they did meet those requirements. So that's what that document is really looking at.
Thank you. And the last portion of my report is just recapping a mid-year meeting with ASPPB. They met on April 9th through the 10th of this year. Some of the topics that were discussed were the impact of COVID on training. Some of the academic programs, had online versus hybrid, synchronous versus asynchronous learning, in clinical settings using telesupervision versus direct supervision, and this overall, just a concern of competency of the students. Some of the other key questions that came up were, how might our trainers be more prepared to serve the public effectively in light of the pandemic? And just looking at, our students ready for internships, our interns ready for postdocs, and our postdocs ready for licensure. And then just overviewing of regulation post-COVID is, will there still be licensure waivers, the impact of telehealth and remote supervision, emergency rule making, and digital processes. Like some states discuss that they enacting laws to continue these past the pandemic. And it just varies across the states, but most of them are looking to implement continuing, these type of modifications because they were helpful and effective as well. Also, one of the topics were social media statements, and just talking about the use of the social media guidelines don't necessarily reflect the role of the psychologists in their personal lives, but just discussing, clinical boundaries and protection of client confidentiality, and trying to find a balance of being able to have your freedom of speech, and being mindful to be careful what you post, looking at the telepsychology guidelines, and make an effort to try to keep it separate. The membership did do a survey on getting feedback for under their diagnostic survey. And they were looking at embracing overlapping scopes, understanding their areas of controversy, especially with the EPPP Part 2. They were made aware of some foundational issues, and they're looking to formulate a new strategic plan to anticipate, collaborate, and protect. With anticipation, some of their key goals would be looking at legislation issues, trends, and guidance, and being in the forefront of psychology. We're collaborating with the Model Practice Act, board trainings, mobility, uniformity, and equivalence, and more peer networking. And their protection, they're looking to protect the exam, tackle deregulation, impact of regulation, and public protection. And Dr. Pomelaris was in attendance too. I didn't know if he had any comments that he wanted to add regarding the mid-year meeting.
Sure. It was all online. So it was a little bit different this year. And as Ms. Moore went through, there's a number of different topics they talked about. One of the other pieces they did, of course, as they always do at these meetings, is their EPPP update with the Part 2. And currently, they said 8 jurisdictions out of the 64 jurisdictions are actually using the Part 2 or require the Part 2 now. And they're really working on those efforts. And that they on this, as well as the actions they're taking to reduce bias. And I think Ms. Moore covered everything else.
Great, thank you.
Very good.
All right, that concludes my administrative report. We're ready to move on to the next.
Yep, so moving on to number 6, the Enforcement Division. We're going to turn it over to Mr. Fernandez first, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Awesome.
Hello, everyone. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good.
Good. Before we get started real quick, Ms. Moore, I just sent you some supplemental dismissals. Would you mind sending that to the panel real quick? Sorry for the late submission,
Okay.
everyone.
Sure.
Do we want to come back to this? Do you need us to review these before you move on?
No, in the meantime, regarding the ones in your packet, 1 through 42, does the panel have any questions regarding those? No?
Let me get through on my screen here.
Sure.
And this is the 1 through 42, the cases dismissed by staff.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And I believe Ms. Moore has sent the supplemental
Yes,
dismissals. Yes, thank you, Ms. Moore.
you're welcome.
Okay. And I'm available for questions on those if the panel has any.
There we go. Okay, and so no action is needed on these.
No,
No, sir.
Very good. Let me get back to, okay, so that's a review there. Are we on to A2 status reports then? Is that right, Mr. Fernandez? We're done?
Yes, sir.
Very
yes.
good. Thank you very much for all the hard work on that. Moving on to status reports, Ms. Moore.
Okay. In your packet, board packet on page 80, you can view the second quarter status report for enforcement. There were a total of 118 pending complaints. 18 of those are new. 6 cases are involving alleging sexual violations. Then the 3 cases that were dissolved in quarter 2. And all 3 of those were by staff. And just looking at the total number of cases, there are 8 cases from fiscal year 2019. There are 68 cases for fiscal year 2020 and 42 cases from fiscal year 2021.
So I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Of the 6 pending cases alleging sexual violations, that could reflect 1 licensee with more than 1 violation or 6 separate licensees.
Correct. It could be
The
one
way.
person with many complaints.
Yes.
Because 1 is too many, but I just want us to understand what that 6 means. And then with total pending cases, does what is in the chart reflect the fact that there are no pending cases from 2018, 17, or 16 anymore? Is that correct?
That's correct.
That is
Yes.
correct.
That is to be celebrated. And the fact that there are only 8 from 2019, I just want to make sure that does not go unnoticed by members of this board.
Thank you.
Alfonso, this
sir.
is, I want everybody to keep in mind, this is second quarter numbers, meaning this is for through February 28th. Now, if you watched the BHEC meeting back on May 4th, you'll see we gave the council a mid-third quarter status update. On that update, correct me if I'm wrong, Alfonso, but we were down to 87 pending complaints at Psych.
We were under 100 for sure. I don't remember the accurate number, but
Yeah, it
for
was
sure
80.
under 100.
Yeah, it was 80 something. I remember
can
because I
find it
think
around
that's
it.
the lowest that I'd ever seen it for psychology. So just know these numbers, when you get at your next meeting and you get the third quarter numbers, it's going to be significantly lower than what you're looking at here. So
You're right. It was 87, sir.
yeah, enforcement. I took my ginkgo biloba. I thought I remembered.
Very good.
Yeah, I think y'all are going to be pretty well pleased with the direction that things are going. Enforcement and the lawyers are really hammering it hard to tackle that backlog that came over from HHSC, while also not letting Psych and LMFT, slip into backlog.
Dr. Fletcher, thanks for pointing that out, and indeed, good work to staff for chewing through that.
I also have a question, and it's just for Alfonso or for others. So last year, or in the third and fourth quarter, if you look at that from last year, that's almost 70 new complaints that were received, and yet here we are with just 40, around 40 in the first half. Should we expect? Do we typically see larger complaints coming in the latter half of a year? Or is that, I know it's hard to see trends, but is that typical, or what are your thoughts just as moving forward and just kind of beginning to prepare?
It is really hard to predict, but I do see a downtime in complaints in the winter and in the holiday season. Summer, it does pick up just a little bit, but not really by much.
Okay, so it's, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't guess I had recognized that distinction in those numbers, Doc, that you just pointed out. I don't know what would cause that or why that would be the case. I hadn't noticed that before.
Because if I remember, typically we would be sort of a steady stream of complaints that would, I mean, it would go up and down, but it would be, I don't remember there being a big peaks and valleys.
Alfonso, can you, don't do it now, but what I want to do is I want to look and see at the categories of complaints that the numbers by category. In other words, forensic child custody. I'm wondering if that new forensic child custody, the new rule we have in place that says you got to wait till your case is over before you file the complaint. I'm wondering if that has caused a decrease in the number of complaints that we're receiving. If so, that would be expected. But let's look at those numbers and see what the numbers tell us by the type of complaint we're receiving, how y'all categorize it. That'll help us narrow down what's going on here.
Okay.
Just give me just look back over, I guess, the first 2 quarters of BHEC and then the last 2 quarters of TSBEP.
Okay, will do.
And then if I could just add one other piece, and Alfonso, this may be something for you to comment on, for those that are watching on YouTube or watching wherever, members of the public who might be interested, when things are dismissed, and so they get dismissed, and that's part of what creates the numbers going down and things being dealt with and cases being closed. They can be dismissed because there's insufficient evidence. They can be dismissed because somebody making a complaint fails to cooperate. My understanding from what I've heard in BHEC meetings, as well as ours, is that means that the staff the investigators will ask the person making the complaint to provide something, and then they kind of disappear. They don't respond. And without that, a case cannot be kept open.
Right.
Other big one is lack of jurisdiction, people making complaints that are not under the umbrella of what the legislature has tasked us to do. So
Correct.
Things that are not within the scope of our role in protecting the public. What does untimely mean if something is?
We accept, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the board rule. We need to accept anything filed within 5 years of the last services, where the last time the service is provided. Anything before that is considered untimely. And I believe it's 7 years for any sexual misconduct cases.
Okay.
It's like a statute of limitations.
Yes, that's the word.
Is the way it works.
Okay, because there's a lot that we see are dismissed due to insufficient evidence. And then what appears to be next is lack of jurisdiction, which I know as a board member is difficult to help people understand that something is not within the scope of our role as defined by the legislature. Then it looks like the third one is the person who made the complaint does not cooperate. Would that be an accurate reflection of what the data shows the board members?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I just want to add for that one on the complainant failed to cooperate. We do try. We give them several chances to get what we need to move forward, but sometimes, like you said, they just disappear or they just prolong saying they're going to get it, but they never do. And like you said, we can't hold it open forever. So we have to move on.
Sometimes they change their mind and just say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
We have that happen as well.
True.
So when we're looking at the numbers and how long it takes for complaints to be dealt with, that can influence the numbers too. When we are giving somebody who's made a complaint every opportunity, we contact them numerous times. We've seen that when we've done ISCs. And then that can delay it, but that would be understandable because we want to give the person making the complaint an opportunity. So just because something's delayed doesn't necessarily mean it's not being dealt with. It could mean that there's a period of time we're allowing somebody making a complaint to provide more data for a decision to be made. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that didn't go unnoticed.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'll add one thing, because I participated in ISCs recently, and the things that even rise up to the ISC level, this recently, it just seemed, I'm gonna make a general statement. The things that we were looking at there wasn't a whole lot there for us to sink our teeth into. What I was happy to see is that even when it was even close to the line of a question, it is getting to the board level so that we are seeing it. So that I'm pretty happy that we're seeing anything that could be even remotely questionable, that we could have something to go after. So I want to say that openly, both for the public to hear, but also for staff to hear, that I appreciate seeing things that when we have voted to not pursue things, that you're still bringing those to our attention, because there was enough there that we should have a discussion about it. Even though I think y'all probably may have had an idea that there wasn't a whole lot there, I'm glad that we still are seeing it, because I'd never want it to be the other way around.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, so well done. Okay, where are we? Why are we here? Are we going on to projected time schedules now? Am I getting ahead of ourselves?
You're on track.
Okay, good. Mr. Fernandez.
Yes, sir. For this quarter, we had time schedule changes for 15 cases. Does the panel have any questions on those?
Okay. Any questions? Okay, moving on to ISC panels. Mr. John Bridges.
I want to report that we just had our first ad hoc session. I think everything went smoothly, though I am open to any recommendations from the panelists if they think they have an idea of how to make it go more smoothly.
I thought it went well. I think the idea of, in terms of our ability, I do think this is one thing where Zoom, while I talked about it earlier, I have a desire to get us back in person, meeting in person. For the ISCs, I think that this has been a really great process. I think the participation was great. It felt it felt to me, from at least this side of the table, it felt like the people who came before us, I feel like had ample ability and time to make their case. But I thought it went really well.
I thought it went really well. And while I think the most recent ISC doesn't reflect this, it gives the person making the complaint a greater opportunity to participate, because as a board member participating in ISCs, but I'm sure the investigators and staff feel this way too, when somebody makes a complaint and then they do not elect to become a part of the ISC to make themselves accessible to our questions, that I would prefer to have the person making the complaint there so that I could ask them questions. And I think the Zoom opportunity will get rid of one barrier, people losing a day of work or needing childcare in order to participate who made a complaint. I think the Zoom way of doing it gives them another reason to participate. And I'm all for that for members of the public. Because I wish that we had 100% participation in ISCs from people making the complaint. I think it also can assist those that come before us in ISCs if they want to have an attorney. I think it also assists them to be able to have an attorney that's more accessible and available on their day that is assigned to them. So I don't have any complaints. I think the only hiccup we had was John logging on in the very beginning. And next time it'll be my turn, just making sure. But we were ready at the time we were supposed to be ready. We were able to have very productive discussion. I think it was run very, very efficiently. I appreciate how it moved along. If we had 8 to deal with that day, I think we could have managed it very, very well. We need to be prepared always for that opportunity too. So I was very pleased, and I appreciate all the work that went into making it happen.
Dr. Fletcher, you raise a really good point about like the accessibility, because I do think it's asking a lot of somebody who files a complaint to give up a day to come to Austin. And I think definitely has a chilling effect. I'll give a quick example. Even the property tax protest arena. I had a family member who protested and is trying to do something with their property tax. They went to arbitration. This family member lives in North Texas. They sent they asked for an in-person arbitration, and they've made it in just south of Houston. Now, if that doesn't have a chilling effect on somebody being able to protest their taxes, I don't know what is. The idea, though, that somebody who, a member of the public who has been wronged by a licensee in El Paso, do you think El Paso is going to get the same level of service as somebody who files a complaint in Austin? The answer is no, because literally you're crossing a time zone to get to Austin to state your case. And so Zoom totally levels the playing field between everybody, is that one person isn't necessarily in person and gets the benefit of seeing us face to face, and the other one has to dial in. So the symmetry of both sides of it was also good.
Also, let's consider the types of complaints here. On the cases where they are more sensitive and where people have been abused or there's been assault by a therapist, there's a PTSD, there's an anxiety issue there. I'm more likely to be able to join the meeting on Zoom if I didn't have to see the idiot that messed with me,
Yeah. I think there's more cases to almost never going back in person for ISCs. I'm sure there's a reason. I can't think of it right now. I just think there's so many benefits to doing it this way.
Very good.
All right, so moving on back to dismissals.
I have no additional dismissals to present.
Okay.
Are they needing to select three more ISC panel members, or are we doing it different now?
No, we still need volunteers for March 1st through May 31st to be on call of 2022. I think I saw a hand, Mr. Adler. Yeah.
Correct.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So the next ISCs are not till March of next year? Is that what you're saying? Or
No,
the next time you'll need people?
We have the roster set through through the first meeting in 2022, the roster set. So we were looking for essentially second quarter of 2022 right now.
Okay. I'll put in my calendar.
Again, I feel like I'll be on a roll after December, so might as well just keep it going.
It looks like I'm next up for public member on that one, so I'll go ahead and volunteer for March.
Actually, like for May, that area, I might be getting married, so.
That's not an excuse, Herman.
Minor detail.
You can zoom in. It doesn't matter where you are.
Put me down, and I don't know.
Can I correct you? You will be getting married. You said I might be. I'm just going to help you out here, buddy.
Well, the date is uncertain now. So I was saying like that. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
That's what I meant by that.
Okay.
The date is not clear yet. It's not in stone. I know what I'm saying.
Very good.
Congratulations.
If something comes up, we can have somebody cover for you.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Like a wedding or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or bachelor party. That's.
I think I have my 3 volunteers. I just want to check real quick. Dr. Becker, Mr. Adler, and Mr. Bridges. All right.
Thank you to our volunteers, to our intrepid volunteers. Thank you. Where are we?
By the way, if Mr. Adler does have a conflict, I would be more than happy to step in for him.
All right, I'll note that down. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so do we have dismissals we need to vote on? I'm sorry, I don't have that screen up.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to 6B, Agency Council review of agreed orders approved by the Executive Director.
I don't know that there are any for you to review at this point.
So no, okay, so no agreed orders for board ratification or SOA either.
Correct.
Moving on, okay, great. let's go through. Y'all ready to keep trucking? Maybe we'll take a 5-minute break in half an hour. Do y'all want to do that now? All right, let's keep on trucking then. Committee reports, applications committee. I think we have some things here to discuss.
Yes.
Adler and Palomares want to lead this discussion, or Ms. Moore, did you have something you wanted to start with?
Oh, no, we have 2 cases. One's an appeal and one is just a regular application issue.
Mr. Chair, could I suggest maybe we jump ahead to the Rules Committee first?
Okay, we can do that. Okay, perfect. Who wants to lead that discussion here?
I can just introduce the first rule is
That'd be great.
13. And there's 2 versions in your packet that you're looking at. This was the rule that we looked at the last board meeting. we came back, we decided to withdraw it and then do a little rewrite on it based on comments. The 2 versions, the only difference is in B3 between the 2. They both are identical except for B3, and B3 essentially says the same thing. The difference is that the sentences are reversed in the way B3 reads. So if the first version, the last sentence, let me see here. The last sentence in the first version, the 413 draft, that last sentence in the new language is shifted to the beginning in the 420 version. And I think just as a bit of background, this was the 413 version was sent to the Rules Committee to look at. And if I could speak for the Rules Committee, I think they were in favor of it, other than the rewording of that last sentence. The reason why B3 was written that way is how we sort of logically thought you would go from start to finish to get to the end result. But I think when other people other than lawyers read it, they felt like it read better and they could understand it better by moving that first sentence to the beginning. So that was sort of the discussion or the debate that we wanted to present and kind of get the feedback from the board to see which version of that B3 that they liked better, and on any other part of that rule.
Patrick, the Rules Committee preferred the 420 version, right?
The 420 version, that's right.
Yeah.
Do we need to discuss this, or it sounds like we've got some consensus here from the Rules Committee? Be willing to entertain a motion if we're ready to go on that.
I move that we accept the 420 version.
I would second it.
Been moved and seconded to accept the recommendation, the recommendation of the Rules Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Say no. All right, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Patrick, do you want to lay out the second one for us real quick?
Sure. The last meeting too, there was some discussion about making some changes for the licensure rules for psychology licenses, and that subsection G was what I drafted a much longer, wordier version, and Daryl came back and said, no, this is way too long, and was able to pare it down and actually make it more direct. And so this was, if you remember the discussion from last board meeting, this was a way to look at and make exceptions for the board to review and make I don't want to say exceptions, but ways to look at and find ways that people's previous experience may actually fit the rules, but it would require a board review. And we didn't put the whole rule there because it's quite long. So I put the last 2 subsections so you could see kind of where it would fit in with the rule.
Patrick, you and I had some discussions about whether or not under G1 there, that 4th sentence down, it says subsections A, C, and D. You remember you and I discussing whether or not we need to I was wrestling with whether to recommend that A be included in that. Do you remember what you and I kind of finally agreed on? I can't remember. I think we said to leave it in.
Yeah, my memory is telling me that we both kind of decided that it would be best to leave it in because it would be far more inclusive. So there would be a greater ability for when the board reviews an application, they can look at one of those requirements under A, B, or C, or A, C, and D, I'm sorry. And if we took A out, it might not leave the board as much flexibility as I believe what the board was looking for.
Let me see if I had some notes, some comments that were set out on the side of this. It doesn't look like they transferred over here. Let me, okay. I'm gonna, Mr. Chair, do you mind if I share my screen with everyone so that y'all can kind of see what our thoughts were on this?
Go for it. I'm actually gonna have to step away for about 3 minutes here, but y'all can carry on. Vice Chair, can you take the duties for just a minute?
I can, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, this has my comments on it here so that we can kind of, wow, that's not, there we go.
So Daryl, when we're referring here to subsection A, C, and D, we only have part of this rule.
Right.
What is the subsection A, C, and D?
Stand by.
It talks about the required supervised experience. So it's talking about the internship and the postdoctoral experience is what that's covering.
Just 1 second here, Doc. Okay.
Because I'm trying to wrap my brain around how it's written, because the internship for APA requirements is not going to be pulled out as separate. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around how this is written in terms of more broadly, because APA is not required for licensure in the state of Texas, but
let me kind of see if I can paraphrase it. The way that we've got this proposed new rule written, as long as you have 1,500 hours of internship, it wouldn't necessarily have to have occurred within your doctoral program. It could be a postdoc internship. Currently, we don't accept that under our rules. Your internship has to be part of your doctoral program unless there's a certain date that we do accept postdoc internships if you graduated before, I forget whatever the date was. But what this rule says is if you have a postdoc internship, as long as it's 1,500 hours and as long as you have 1,500 hours of postdoctoral supervised experience, then we can waive the requirement that it be a internship within the doctoral program. Let's see here. That's what I'm trying to point out in that first comment, which you can't see right now. Hold on a second. That's what I'm trying to point out in this comment here. you could, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure y'all understood that this rule would effectively allow you to accept somebody who didn't have an internship within their doctoral program, that if they got a postdoc internship, you could accept it. They have to petition you in order and ask for special exception to that rule, but it gives you the option. And kind of what gave rise to this, if you'll recall, was the applicant at our last meeting, Dr. Stanley, who I believe is back on the agenda today. Y'all had tabled that application at that meeting. She had a postdoctoral internship with someone. The internship didn't meet all the requirements of our internship rules. She had an internship. It just didn't meet some of the more, there weren't 2 or more interns. There wasn't, I don't think, 2 or more
Right.
supervisors, that kind of stuff. And we didn't have any wiggle room. We didn't have any way to, I don't want to put words in y'all's mouth, but if the board felt like, or if they were comfortable enough with her level of training and education and experience, you didn't have the wiggle room in order to grant her a waiver. This gives you that kind of wiggle room. It doesn't require you to accept it, but it gives you the option of accepting it. And what I'm doing with this comment is I'm pointing out, if you do that, you are kind of opening the door to, again, accepting postdoc internships.
So Daryl, if I can clarify it a little bit more, at least how I'm understanding it. Most doctoral degrees, or almost all doctoral degrees, are going to require an internship. So the expectation is anyone who graduates with their doctoral degree will have an internship. What this does is allows for those individuals who do not have it, whose pre-doctoral internship does not meet all the requirements of our licensing criteria, then in effect, once they graduate with their doctoral degree, but they didn't have the 2 interns on site, they didn't have the supervisors on site, whatever, they didn't meet our requirements, this allows them a second chance to have a second postdoc, or have now a postdoc internship that meets all those internship requirements. And upon completion of that, they can petition for in their application to be considered for a license. So it's really in reality, I don't think we'll see anyone that comes with a doctoral degree that meets the doctoral degree requirements not having an internship. This is really this allows for those whose doctoral internship does not meet those requirements for them to do a do-over in their postdoctoral world to get that internship. Is that correct?
It would, yes, but it's not. It doesn't just create or mandate that they do a whole new internship altogether. Now, the board could order that. Again, this isn't tying your hands as to what you can order as corrective measures. Let's say they didn't have 2 or more interns in their internship. It was just them. They were the only ones in their doctoral internship program. You could come in and say, well, look, I hate to deny this person because they didn't have another intern with them. So we're going to make them do this other endeavor that will incorporate the socialization skills that the 2 or more interns is I think intended to achieve. You've got almost total creativity to cure that deficiency. Whereas now you have no wiggle room. You have no way to cure that deficiency. And so that's what this rule is designed to do. Now, I will tell you, Dr. Palomares, this would allow somebody who didn't have an internship at all within their doctoral program to come in. They could ask you, can I still get licensed? I've got 1,500 hours. I did a more structured 1,500 hours with a psychologist after my doctoral degree. And then I have 1,500 hours of postdoc. And you could then choose to accept that 1,500 hours of highly structured hours to satisfy the internship requirement. So you might have somebody apply from, I'm just going to say the old days, where their doctoral program didn't have an internship. And this would create a pathway where you could accept them if you felt comfortable with their other training and experience. And if you didn't, you could set standards and say, you have to do this before we will accept those 1,500 hours. It gives you kind of you can write the check as to what has to be done before we'll let you in. Whereas
But right
now you
now-
can't.
Yeah, we have no discretion now.
It's either pass, fail right now. That's all you
Right.
got.
I
Right.
just want to be
Yeah,
careful that we're
I believe it
not
was-
getting too subjective. I mean, I want to be thoughtful that we're giving ourselves some leeway to consider situations like the one that we're presented with. But at the same time, I don't want us to get too squirrely down the road of opening the door too wide, that this is really wiggly, in that someone who maybe has had a lesser level of training that we might be not comfortable with is now bending a rule on internship hours that we might be less than comfortable now petitioning. And if they had a good lawyer, is arguing that the rules are suddenly saying something that they didn't say before. So I really want to look carefully at the unintentional consequences of putting something really broad here that gives us a lot of wiggle room. You know, I want to open the door to what makes sense for, but I don't want to open it so wide that we are being given a lot of subjective ability to make decisions here, because I don't know that that's really what we should be doing as a board.
I think that's a really good comment to put on the record. What was just said. I think that's really good. Because the reality is, though, is any new applicant still has to pass muster with a majority of professional members on this board to be let in. And I have a lot of faith that based on how we've done these in the past, that where we have had discretion, we're pretty limited and we're pretty measured in exceptions that we've made where we could. And they've been rare and very limited. And so while I am glad to have those comments and concerns on the record, because I share them, giving ourselves the ability as a board to make it's not even, I guess, I hate the word common sense because it's abused so often, but having the ability to reasonably make an exception where somebody falls just outside the letter of a requirement, when in reality, is there a risk to the public? Have they gone through everything they need to go through to be a successful practitioner? Yeah, then we should be able to let that person practice.
You know, Dr. Becker, one of my concerns in this, I think we talked about it at the last meeting, and I know Patrick and I have talked about it, is what we didn't want to do is create some kind of broad road, to hell, to wherever Tom, Dick, and Harry can ask for an exception to any and all requirements.
Yes.
Obviously, we cannot waive statutory or constitutional requirements. We don't have that authority. So, we can't waive the postdoc requirement. We have some wiggle room on whether the internship takes place in the doctoral program or after the doctoral program, because that's not statutorily set. You have to have an internship, but where it occurs isn't statutorily set. So we've got some wiggle room there. So this is what Patrick and we struggled and argued and debated about how to structure this so that we wouldn't inundate staff with waiver requests. And we felt like, well, if you make them have at least 1,500 hours of internship already, 1,500 hours of postdoc, that's going to keep out those folks who don't have any internship and are just asking for a complete waiver of the internship. And where I get the 1,500 and 1,500 is we have a rule that says if you got 3,000 hours of supervised experience from another jurisdiction, or you're licensed in another jurisdiction and you can attest to having 3,000 hours of supervised experience, we have an expedited route of licensure for those individuals. Well, if it's good enough for that, that's where I come up with the 1,500 here, is if we're accepting 3,000 hours in that form, then it's probably a safe practice to accept here.
My concern about doing this is that it does provide us some leeway when we look at unique cases. But I think it also opens a door to allow for individuals who are in the training process to skirt the system in some ways. Right now, in our doctoral program, we work really hard for our students to meet those internship requirements and get those APA or APIC accredited programs. And if they don't, then creating internship sites that do meet all those minimum requirements that we see as that are required for licensure in Texas. But I think what this could allow from that side is that if there isn't an internship site that's set up that's not accredited, and so now you have to create one for a doctoral student, and knowing that there's this caveat that allows them that if they can't have 2 licensed supervisors on site, if they don't have to have another another intern with them, if it allows them to actually skirt part of the system and then say, well, then I'll apply and I'll make a request that my internship, I just couldn't create that to meet those requirements. So if you allow me to do it again, I can do. I have some concerns about that. That one of the unintended consequences of having this leeway can allow for individuals to take advantage of it. And we as a board, when we see those applications, may not understand that that was the intention or the motivation behind it. I could see them coming forward and saying, look, this was the only way I could set up an internship. I didn't have this, I didn't have that. And so please allow me to do these things and then I can go forward. And I think it begins to water down that internship requirement. And especially at this time when we do not have any good measure of competence, when we've removed the oral exam, we've taken away that competency piece, we have not approved or agreed to bring in the EPPP2 that measures that aspect of competency. We're really relying on those training programs, and more importantly, we're relying on the internship experience to be that last level of competency. And my concern here at this point in time, if we open this up, we are reducing that ability to evaluate competency when we don't have other safeguards in place that evaluate that as well. And I think I'm really, I'm opposed to this because of that. I think and especially at this point in time, I think if we move forward with the EPPP2 or some other measure of evaluating competency, then I'm more open to that. And I could see where someone who graduates and their internship didn't quite meet all the requirements can be allowed some other opportunities. But at this point, what we're saying is that internship experience really is that culminating experience, because we don't have formal evaluations that are turned in from their postdoc supervision. We just require that they document that they've had it. So the last area of evaluation is really that internship. And my concern is allowing some leeway, some other piece to it at this point in time, with no other measures for competency at this at the last level. I think it's not. I think we're not doing service to our public.
I feel like, Dr. Palomares, I feel like the situation that you described, like if that applicant came before the board, in the situation that you described by somebody really, who had other options, who tried to skirt or try to game it, would I vote in that hypothetical case to accept or deny? Like, I don't think I would accept it, because if you had a path and you knew the rule when you went in, you didn't, why am I giving you an exception? I think that there have been other situations that don't fit the set of facts that you described there, that I think that I would like to have some discretion as a board, that we can collectively, again, and it's still a majority professional member board, like they're going to have to pass muster with you guys and have to you're going to have to decide if it's worth making an exception. I would just like to have that discretion for those random cases that fall outside the bounds of the exact rule. And I can see I totally get how somebody who reads the rules, haha, I see a way through here. If that, I think the facts would demonstrate that that's kind of how they approached it, and I would be with you in denying that application. But I would like to. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a reason that we didn't put the word pre-doctoral in this? if we simply changed in number 1, a formal pre-doctoral internship in this? And we stated that the expectation is that they do 1,500 hours in a pre-doctoral internship, because that is what we expect. And we
Yeah,
kind of limit this to not having that expectation of those all postdoctoral hours. Why would we put that out there, that loophole could happen as part of a waiver? I mean, people could still petition and we could still consider that, because that would still be, an applicant could petition for the waiver, but why wouldn't the expectation that we put out there
I
to
see the
be a
lawyers shaking
formal
their heads.
pre-doctoral internship?
they would not be able to petition because you have now removed the ability of the board to waive the pre-doctoral component of that requirement.
Got it.
And the reason we didn't include it was because of the Stanley application case that happened at the last board meeting. Hers was not a pre-doc internship, it was a post-doc internship. And this kind of arose out of that factual scenario.
Got it. Got it.
I want to put my 2 cents in. I agree fully with Dr. Palmer's. I cannot say his name right now. I'm going to have to practice. So I'm going to call him Dr. Ron. I agree with him on everything he said, and also with Dr. Becker. And the fact that if a program, doctoral program that's training people for licensure doesn't have internship, that's not much of a program. And there are some online programs that are substandard, in my opinion, that do not meet all the requirements. And so I don't think this kind of, this is a very, this leeway is very too much open. It's a big door to enter. I think the way we have it, let people make petition and we can consider a special case is a good one. And I would, at this point, just like Dr. Ron said, we have no other way of testing the competency. So this should be the required as it was before. Thank you.
The one thing I may want to just point out is what G3 was intended is if somebody comes in and you have an issue with their prior, internship, any sort of supervised experience, it's not just a yes or no. It's you can go the middle route and say, we think what you did wasn't sufficient. You didn't get whatever the issue might be. We want you to complete certain terms or conditions before we're going to issue the license, or we'll issue the license as long as you complete them within 6 months, a year, whatever the case may be. So you do have the ability to craft something to address those deficiencies if you feel that the person's almost there, but you really wish the internship was structured better or in a different way.
Dr. Singh, can I ask you a clarifying question? Dr. Singh, I think you said something to the effect of like looking at you agreed with Dr. Palomares, but you wanted potentially to have if we wanted to make an exception that you do want the ability to look at that, or no, and not at all?
Well, I think there already is provision for people to make a petition, just like the Dr. Stanley did. And on case-by-case basis, we can consider that. But to have it in writing, the way to make it a rule, and then it's manipulatable.
Let me defer to our lawyers real quick. Is that not, we don't have the discretion right now?
No, they can appeal, but if there's not a mechanism in the rule by which you can say, okay, we can waive this requirement, we have to apply all the rules uniformly. And so there's not anything particularly such as the case that Mr. Spinks was talking about before with Dr. Stanley. The issue was the rules said they had to meet these standards, and there wasn't a provision in the rules that allowed either a waiver or a way to grant an exception or require additional terms and conditions so that she could then meet those. So currently, no, there's only certain provisions like gap waivers and things like that are in the rules. But for this, there is not. So no, there doesn't exist currently anything right now.
That's I guess the point. I want to think everyone to be clear here is if we're voting against this rule, we won't have discretion where we might want discretion regarding the Stanley case. And if we against it, we're going to not have that discretion. Is that accurate, Patrick?
Yes.
I see. Okay. I just want to make sure I got that clear. Yeah.
I have a question. I was trying to read between the lines or something. Is there a concern that if we pass this, that we're going to see people deliberately not do an internship in their program and try to do it afterwards that's subpar in order to take advantage of this? Okay.
I think all of us would see through that. And I think that it wouldn't be surprising for us to deny those applications.
Dr. Palomar, do you think we would not see through that?
I agree that we would not see through that scenario. My scenario and what I'm seeing is that there are doctoral students who at times are not able to get into an accredited internship program. Whether they've actually tried to get, they've applied. It's for our program, our doctoral program, we have a requirement that they must apply for APIC or APA accredited internships. But that doesn't mean that just because they applied doesn't mean they actually put an effort into it. And when there are not local internship sites available to them, then they may, I have a situation where a student, it looks like they went through the motions, but did not get accepted, which understandably. And so now, after that, then attempts to create a local internship experience. And the fight between the program and that creation of that internship is you must make sure that internship meets all the licensing requirements. And constant moving on to make sure that everything that student does in creating that internship meets all of those requirements for licensure. And I think there are times that you may not see through that because you're seeing them coming to you a year or two later after their postdoc experience as well. And the explanation they can give is, I applied for accredited programs. I didn't get into any accredited programs. So in order for me to graduate, I had to have a homegrown internship experience. Where I live, these are the only, this was the only way that I could do that in order for me to graduate. I did my best to, they can tell you all those things, whether they did or did not, to do it. Unfortunately, my internship doesn't meet the requirements. And I think how it's presented at that point is not as transparent. I think you may hear that I was all set to go on a accredited internship site that met all the requirements, and I had an illness in the family or I had financial difficulties. And so I was forced to create one locally. And in that creation of that local one was not able to have all of the requirements that are required for you by licensure. So now my internship doesn't apply or doesn't meet the criteria. Can I get a waiver? And whether it's by design, whether it's by happenstance, I think there are those things where this allows for that to take place rather than that push from a program to truly say, look, you cannot do this internship site unless you do these things that meet the requirement. So I think there's that, I can see where you may have individuals who manipulate the system and it doesn't come across, it's not very transparent when you look at it from the outside, that's what's happened. So again, I think there are some, the internship is that last step for competency. And without having any other measure to evaluate competency, we as a board are relying a lot on that experience. And at this point, I don't see that piece there. where I feel comfortable enough to allow for opportunities for people to move, to skirt around it or move around it. And I think the other piece to it is our licensing board. I mean, our rules and regulations are out there. The licensing application is out there. It's very straightforward and clear as to what those internship requirements are. And I think anyone who is applying should know those. Anyone who's in a doctoral program should know that these are the requirements for it. And they're not different from other states. So it's not like we in Texas have some unique pieces to it that someone training in another state won't meet them. So I think coming through and saying, well, I didn't know these things, I have concerns about that as well. So I think that's why I stand on, at this point, unless we started looking at and revisit the EPP2 or some other measure of competency, bring back oral exams or something where we as a board can confirm those things. And I know Daryl's shaking your head. It's not happening.
No.
So that, but the EPP2 or some other measure of competency that can collaborate that piece. I'm pretty, at this point, have not heard enough to have me change my mind on opening this piece to the requirements.
I'll tell you my bottom line concern. I don't really, well, I probably do disagree with you, Dr. Palomars, but my concern, it's not that I totally oppose everything you said. My concern is that we're going to exclude somebody and other people, out there for whatever reason. We're going to exclude people who are competent, who could be competent, good providers of mental health services here in the state. And we're going to exclude a lot of good people just to keep out the one that tried to maybe game the system that snuck past us. But I do believe that this board is good enough to really see through somebody who tried to game the system. But I wouldn't like to just change the rules where people could just totally skirt the system and upend the system, but to give ourselves some discretion to make a call. I'm in favor of that. With the fact that it's all on the record here of all of the opposition to people gaming the system, and they should expect a brick wall if we could spot them from trying to game the system.
A primary premise, as I recall it last time we discussed this, was that the young lady that brought her concern to the board indicated that she did not have any other avenue to get those clinician hours. That is simply not true. Not in this particular area. And I don't think it's generally true because of all of the virtual programs now, so I have real concerns about that. And particularly because I know that our psychology program is growing in leaps and bounds here, and that we are adding postdocs annually. I think we started out with something like 7, and we now have 9, and we're expecting maybe 16 next year. So I think the opportunity is there. And not being a psychologist, my concern as a person who might want services from a psychologist, I want to be certain that that person went through the clinical part of the program and not just a theory. I'd like to know that that clinician worked with other clinicians and was prepared to address whatever my concerns were.
Also, Dr. John and others, there is great value in pre-doctoral internship. And it's very carefully set by the universities and programs. And to skip that, I don't think there is it's the same quality of training as somebody who maybe has a degree online and then does postdoctoral some kind of internship, that's just, to me, is substandard. And since our major duty is to protect the public and to make sure people are competent who are providing these services, I at this point, from what I know and what I've heard, I would be very opposed to this.
Let me ask, like Dr. Becker and Dr. Palomares, what I get your concern, Dr. Palomares. The deceit would be hard to detect is what I take away from what you're saying. And I guess my question is do we not get any kind of reassurance from the fact that they're under a licensed psychologist as a supervisor when they're doing this? At least one. I mean, do we not? To me, I'm like, I kind of give a vote of confidence to our supervisors. I'm like, they're not going to let somebody through that's not qualified. And so I'm like, shouldn't we rely on their judgment? They're the ones that are they're the boots on the ground. Shouldn't I rely on their judgment if they pass this person through and say, yep, she's good to go? I mean, whether it was pre-doc or post-doc, as long as she had sufficient training and education that y'all were comfortable otherwise, why aren't we showing some deference to that supervisor and saying, yeah, let her on into the club. Let's field her as a provider.
Well, I think at this point then, we should be looking at what are the requirements? Why do we have these requirements set at this level? I mean, as I understand it, these are equivalent to the national standards. So it's what we see in other states, what are done at AP accredited internship sites. But if we're seeing individuals who are asking for exceptions to it, I think Mr. Bilemowicz, I understand your disagreement and I can see where you're coming from as well. But I think if we're really looking at holding back individuals who are qualified to provide psychological services in our state and to our public, then maybe we should be looking at what are requirements and change those rather than looking at making exceptions to it. So I think part of it is looking at that piece of if we're holding one or two individuals back that are qualified, I'd rather do that than let in more individuals who are unqualified. Mr. Spinks, your comment about deference to the supervising psychologist, those internship supervisors, there's a wide range of level of supervision and level of interactions that they have with those interns. And when you have several that are responsible, sometimes we see some, seeing it in the field, supervisors aren't always there looking at making that decision, yes or no, that this individual is qualified to go to the field. I mean, in reality is that's what they should be doing. But I have seen where they defer to the university and say, well, we have some concerns about this individual, but it goes back to the university to make those decisions. So I think it's not as clear cut as every supervisor who supervises an intern feels that mantle of responsibility of saying, if I say they pass, then they're ready to go work with the public. I think it's like, well, I feel that responsibility that if they pass, then they pass my internship course, but it's still up to the university to determine whether they're fully qualified. So I think there's some, I'm not sure if I would be willing to say that all accept that responsibility, and that's who we, based upon what you were asking, really is that what they're doing? And I'm not sure.
Well, I think if we get the, excuse me.
Go ahead, Mr. Anton.
Should I go?
Yes, sir.
Yes. If we just get beyond the general requirement and go to specifics, and specifics would mean look at Dr. Stanley. There's no question that Dr. Stanley, in my mind, is competent. This is not a recent graduate. She's got like 20 years of working. She's got people in the community that are standing behind her, not only her supervisors and her intern people. She's got a backing. She's got a judge there. I believe what Patrick said, or I believe it was either Darrell or Patrick, this is not changing the rule in a general sense. We're looking at being specific, and we need to look at each case individually.
It feels to me like we're
Versus
putting some
saying,
elastic
yeah.
in the waistband, if I had to boil it down.
And also regarding the skirting thing, if we're talking about somebody who's skirting around trying to get by stuff, I believe we're going to see other things in the application that are probably going to stand out and are going to smell, you know? And so then I believe we need to be more open-minded and realize that just because we make a rule does not mean that it's fair or it's just.
Well, and that's the point that I was going to bring up as well, which is I think that there are two different issues here. And one is that I think we are bringing this up because we recognize that there are individuals like Dr. Stanley that come to the board who have legitimate concerns. She was trained a time ago, not in the current virtual environment when she would have had access to some of the things that are available right now within training and equitable ability to get some of the things that are available now. So I think that's not a fair criticism of her application. But we're not talking about her as an individual. We're talking about accessibility through rules. And the way that her application was presented, we would not have the ability to remediate her in a way. The only way that we would be able to allow her application licensure under the current rules would be to say this individual who has practiced for 20 years, has the backing of the community, would be to send her back to go do another postdoc. And I think that everybody can look at her application and say, that seems like a very strange thing to ask her to do, would be to go re-specialize again because she was not able to checkbox something 10 years ago as part of her application that she went to re-specialize for. So I think that we are looking at this and saying every once in a while, we have these one-off applications that come in front of the board, that it would be very nice if we could say, we as a board had a way to say, we are looking at this individual application and we would like to be able to say to our community, what if we are able to put together a supervisory packet and say, are there people out there who could provide virtual supervision for 6 months and put together a probationary package where we wrote out what that looked like? And we could do that experience that Dr. Palomares is talking about, where we could look at that individual's competency, say, check, 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 you are meeting the standards that we weren't able to look at as part of your application because it didn't get met, and sign off that, yes, you in fact meet that. I think that, as I brought up originally, and you confirmed with your concern, the way that we have this written, we're worried about the unintentional consequences of what we have written here, because we think that there are perhaps some people who might take advantage of the way that we have this language written out that aren't these one-offs, but perhaps some people who are looking to skirt the standards of our practice and of our profession, who might look to take advantage of this then rule and waiver as it's written. And I think we need to perhaps look at how we could write this to narrow the band, to avoid one situation and allow for the other. Okay, because I think that we all agree that we would like the opportunity to say number 3, okay, and have the power to look at situations under number 3 and look at those competency requirements. It's trying to figure out how to write number 1 that gives us a broad enough band, but a narrow enough band to determine who gets to fit that. And I think that's where we are struggling as a board, is to figure out where to set that band to make it make sense so that not every graduate student coming in is trying to find an easier way to get licensed in the state of Texas, but we still get to serve our folks who are coming in after 5 years that went, wait a minute, I have a great internship, but I was out here and it was only one, or someone's coming in from another state. They're not that frequent, but these situations happen. So I think we need to think about these as two separate issues. It's not about Dr. Stanley, and I think we're making it about Dr. Stanley. I think we need to make it about the rule and about the issues that are presented to our board.
It's been a really good discussion. I feel like everybody's fleshed it out. Are there any further comments or discussions before we make some decisions here?
I just wanted to bring in an example. If we were medical board and this was a surgeon issue, are we willing to accept that, give a license to a person who has not been, who hadn't had proper internship as we think in surgery, and allow that person to be performing surgeries after they have completed this? I think making exceptions like this are dangerous, and we are paying, it seems like we're showing more concern to get who gets to practice, who doesn't, than to making sure that whoever gets to practice has gone through proper training, and everybody has to go through the same things. And we can look at some exceptions now and then, but not make it a rule where you actually put in there for someone to, for exceptions to be made. This seems like we're just making a rule so there could be exceptions.
I just want to say, I understand your point, Dr. Singh, but the fact is we're not dealing with surgeries. That's, it's a difficult, the comparison to me is apples and oranges in a way. And I'm not going to discount,
But it's worse than, it's more,
Dr. Singh.
more important than surgery.
I was just going to finish this. Okay. And so I think comparing it to other situations, and I'm not discounting, what makes up a competent, psychologist and what they have to go through. On the other hand, Dr. Becker, I totally agreed with what you said, and as well as Andoni, that, we have, I think, depending on certain issues, that we should be able to kind of, where it's something that it's not the person's fault, and, just judge them on their own and not have like a, be so black and white about it. Because the fact is, there might be a lot of people who, abuse the system, but I don't want to, for fear of that, let people who are totally qualified to do their job and count them out because of that fear. That's not fair to them.
I just want to offer, if I can, real quick, Carol, is that when Dr. Becker used the example in the very beginning when we were talking about SciPac in California, there are 2 courses she is missing that would not allow her to be licensed in the state of California. So as a clinician who has accomplished so many things, she would not get that opportunity unless she took those 2 courses. So I don't want to make it about Dr. Becker, but I think it's an example of where we have to just ask ourselves, is this really going to serve the citizens of Texas well? If we have information that assists us, are we going to allow ourselves even to look at that information? So I'm not making it about an individual as much as I am saying there's a little bit in the decision tree where there might be an opportunity to say, let's look at this. I just want to say, I think this board is very strict in terms of expectations. Having been on it for a while now, I don't want to say I'm a senior member of the board, but John, you are, but I'm not. Is that we entered at the same time. But I'm going to tell you that I keep thinking about that, and I am just listening to those of you that are saying, if we have these situations, it's not a done deal. It's not just a checklist, you're automatically in. And there is an opportunity to examine all of those things. And I just want to throw that back out there because I'm listening to that piece, knowing that it's not a standard box to the side we're going to be looking at. And I'm just curious if anybody else has comments about that and that parallel.
I think those are all well said comments.
Well, I have a comment about Dr. Becker's idea of 2 courses. In California, there are lots of people of different, more people of different ethnic backgrounds than I guess we have in Texas. And diversity course, I think, is an important one for that state. And sexuality or human sexuality, or was it on sex abuse? I don't know what that's an important issue. I think every state should have required training in that one. So I think for that state, what they're requiring, those 2 extra courses, I will not have any problem. If I was planning to go live in practice in California, I would not have any problem taking those 2 courses to fulfill that requirement because they're there for some reason. And same way, we have requirements for some reason. And when you start tweaking with those requirements and making exceptions, then you are sending a message that those requirements are not really that important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. As chair, I really appreciate the good discussion. I think everybody is very well made. There have been very well made points on both sides of this. Are there any further comments before perhaps we entertain a motion to address this rule?
Mr. Chair, I just want to throw out one option, not suggesting it, but given the importance of this particular issue and kind of the schools of thought I'm seeing here, would you want to maybe just solicit maybe 1 minute of public comment? See if anybody out there has any public comment before
I'm not opposed to that. As long as the comments, I would just caveat to the public, if there's no objection from the rest of the board, caveat to the public is keep it to the subject at hand, please.
Yes, yeah. We're just looking for comments on this this rule change only.
Yep.
And I don't know, maybe there may not be anybody.
Anybody in the public, go ahead.
Can I make a suggestion that it also be comments that are about the rule, not about the individual that caused this rule to get
Yes. Yeah.
I want to really make
We're
that.
talking about broad statewide policy here, not an individual.
Yes, or any individual.
Yeah. I see 2 hands raised. Do we want to do we want to do this less than 3 minutes, Daryl, or what do you think? Minute and a half, or do you go with 3?
Since there's only 2, we can do 3.
Okay. All right. If
it gets to be too many, we'll shave it down to 1 as well.
Yeah, I would encourage, I don't want to cut anybody short, but I would say in the interest of time, do what my first boss taught me: be good, be brief, be gone. So let's hear it though.
Diane, you were muted. We couldn't hear you.
Our first comment is from Tara Coronado.
Hey guys, I don't have a dog in this fight, but it just looks like you're catering to people that can hire attorneys, the attorney that came on and commented, people that can get judges to write letters for them. Carving out exceptions just looks bad. I mean, it just looks bad. So I was just watching this meeting like I always do, but when you asked for a comment, like the lack of transparency, carving out exceptions for people that are well connected, it's got to stop. It's horrible. Everybody needs to be held to the same standard, and there should be more transparency. Thanks.
Thank you.
One moment. Our next commenter is Kenda Dalrymple.
So I represent licensed individuals all over the spectrum, and licensees of other boards who also belong to BHEC, specifically LPC, Social Work, LMFT. Their applications and supervision committees do have the ability to waive certain defects in someone's training if it's warranted by the circumstances. The specifics vary a little bit with those boards, but they're there. The reason why they're there is because a lot of people who go through these programs are absolutely dependent on the program itself. There could be a box that didn't get checked. And this doesn't have anything to do with letting people in who are not competent. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't know anyone who would deliberately game a system and then roll the dice that this board in particular is going to overlook their gamesmanship later on down the road. Nobody would do this on purpose. There is a move to make the rules of these member boards more consistent. And if that is something that this board, is willing to participate in, it's worth considering that your brother boards or sister boards at BHEC do have the ability to make certain concessions. And it's for these hard cases. It's for the one every so often where it really wasn't the applicant's fault. It wasn't caught right away. They've shown competence in other ways, things like that. And so I just wanted you to understand that, your other boards at BHEC do have this ability, and giving the psychology board this ability isn't going to result in a huge flood of applicants who just want to get away with something. It's going to give you the ability to do the right thing in circumstances where it's warranted.
Thank you.
All right, and our last commenter is Mr. Kia Saleh.
Thank you, and thank you to the work of this board here. I would also want to say I think it is to the benefit to make this change to allow the board the option to review these cases. I think in an era in which we have a dearth of mental health professionals in the state and across the nation, creating more opportunity where we could consider qualified applicants who do not meet the strict letter of the regulations based upon this board's ability to review the evidence and make that determination would be an overall benefit to the state. To have more practitioners would be better. And of course, still applying those same, having expectations of that, that those individuals are trained and trained appropriately and will provide good services to the citizens of Texas.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the public comment there. There's no further discussion. Is there any further discussion, first of all? If not, I would entertain a motion on this rule. All right. If there is no motion, there's no action to be taken. Is that correct, Mr. Spinks?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be ornery here for a second. I think that one of our public members brought up something really important, which is to say that some of the sibling boards here have similar language and action here. So if there is something that already exists, Daryl, did we look at what the other boards have in how they handle these situations?
No, and I did not mimic their language, and for reasons that
Okay.
I'll keep unto myself. But
that's okay. But they exist.
Yes. Some of the other boards they will allow applicants to cure deficiencies. Now, I'll tell you also, some of the other boards have been doing things over the years at HHSC that when I look at the rules now, I'm like, I don't know how you had authority to be doing what you were doing. Because they don't have a mechanism in the rule that allows them to waive their own rule requirements, which is what we're grappling with here today. The reason it's important that if you're going to waive requirements that it be in a rule is you have to have the guiding criteria set out in a rule. Otherwise, it's completely arbitrary. It's up to the individual that's making the decision, and that is antithetical to the rule of law. The rule of law says we all get treated the same under the law. And so if you're going to waive something, you have to create a mechanism for yourself that guides and binds yourself in doing so. I'm geeking out on you on the lawyer side here, but there are mechanisms in some of the other boards, I believe, that would do it. They're not worded like what they may not even have specific wording. It may be more of a lack of, well, anyway, it doesn't matter.
If I can just
I didn't copy any of the other boards.
Okay, you just said you were geeking out on us. Some of us, I think, understood what you said, so I don't know what that says about us, but I think it added that we're going to be looking at standardization among all the board rules, and the fact that other boards have already addressed this and there is language in there. I just want to throw that out because the discussion will continue again, which it should. But I think that that's of note. I also don't want to miss the opportunity to thank Mr. Spinks for giving the public the opportunity to comment, because I do think all of us value that, for each person to be given that opportunity, even if they have opposing views. So I don't want that to be missed that we've done that. I appreciate it.
And I would also like to say that I think if this is going to be something coming up in the future where we're looking at some more looking at how our rules are compared to the other boards, I'm willing to take a look at it in the future as well.
Let me ask, Daryl, would it be, I mean, how much different do you imagine in terms of the rules of giving ourselves some discretion on this? How much different do you imagine it could be than what we have before us right now?
What do you mean? How much different could it be?
I mean, how different? I mean, how much more? I'm glad we're going to look at this, because I know the standardization thing is important across the different rules across the different boards. It seems like, from what I'm reading between the lines of what you said, there's some problems in those rules and the other boards, and maybe those aren't the ones to be copying from, although they need to be addressed. Do we not potentially have a potential solution to be modeled after on other boards as we fix other things in front of us right now? I'm putting you on the spot, I know.
Yeah, I mean, the solution that I felt like was the best option for us, and that candidly I hoped we could use to then spread amongst the other boards for uniformity, was the one that I brought to you today. And the reason why I worded it kind of the way I did is there are certain things that you can't waive. There are certain things I recognize that you don't want to waive, that you shouldn't waive. The fact that you don't want to waive the requirement of an internship altogether, obviously, that's not, I knew that would be a no-go from the beginning, but this rule that you have before you here, I tried to respect certain pillars, certain foundational pillars in the training programs, while giving you elastic in the waistband, if you will, for other areas. It's a concept I'm very well aware of, for all the weight I've put on, but giving you the elasticity in other areas, such as the number of interns, the number of supervisors, that kind of stuff. I don't really know how to answer your question any other way than that.
No, I think you've answered my question.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I don't think there's a specific rule that I could point to right now that another board has that would be the panacea that we're hoping it would solve all the problems.
John, are you saying that we could be the leaders in the language to assist the other boards as the standardization committee is reviewing this?
That's what I was trying to get from Daryl, and what Daryl explained to me was that this is a good model that it's narrow in its scope. it's narrow in what things that we can waive. Well, and Dr. Palomar suggested, well, maybe we should look at our rules rather than giving ourselves any leeway. I actually like our standards. I think that they're good standards. I don't think they need to be revised, and I don't really think they need to be lowered. I think there's been a good bar set. Again, I'm not a professional. I'm not a professional psychologist, but when I look at the standards and I've got to know you guys talk about the process of what it takes to become a psychologist, I think we've got a great system in place right now. Again, recognizing that there are rarities that fall outside the letter of something that we ought to have the ability to make call a ball or strike on. I see Dr. Becker raising her hand.
I am, because again, I'm going to go back to a question that I asked earlier and ask for one more explanation. So Daryl, in number 1, if we change the word formal internship to pre-doctoral internship, and those 1,500 hours are required before the degree is conferred, I'm not understanding how that requires them, that someone couldn't then put in a waiver and ask for a modification in areas of deficiency if their pre-doctoral internship doesn't meet all of the standards that are put out.
They could, in that case, if their pre-doc internship didn't meet, say they didn't have the 2 interns in it,
Right.
they could ask for a waiver of that.
Right.
My point was, is if they had a postdoc internship rather than a pre-doc, by adding the term pre-doctoral internship, you cut out those individuals from being able to request a waiver or modification.
But that's okay, because we wouldn't want that, because that would negate those standards that are already in our practice.
Okay.
Right. And that was what folks were objecting to earlier.
Yes.
So we're
Yes.
not interested in including folks who are trying to skip the pre-doctoral internship.
I mean, you're asking me, that's a call y'all are going to have to make. It just depends on how broad you want to make. And when I say an exception, that's a misnomer, because that implies that anybody is just automatically entitled to it. That's not the case.
I'm just wondering if we change that word formal to pre-doctoral, if that helps folks who are uncomfortable with this rule, like Dr. Palomares, if that helps with this, because then there's still that expectation of, we're expecting you to do a pre-doctoral internship. And if you are suddenly asking for a waiver for your pre-doctoral internship, you're going to have to put together a full explanation of why you're doing it somehow differently and asking for a modification on that. Because that should be the expectation of the degree.
The only one point to maybe note is currently in A1, we do allow for the formal internship to be completed post the degree if their degree was conferred prior to September 1 of 2017. So I remember in a former much longer draft of this, we had started putting carve outs and caveats like that in it. And I suppose you could always refer back to A1.
That's a grandfathering provision.
Yeah.
Because when we made the change in 2016, 2017, whenever it was, we used to accept what we call roll your own internships, which could occur in a postdoctoral setting. And the board made the change, said, no, we're only going to accept doctoral internships from this point forward. Problem was, we didn't want to make that change in the middle, make people knock out applicants who were in the pipeline at that time. We wanted to be able to grandfather in people who had trained under the old rules, and that way they could still come into the profession. And this would only be prospective in nature. So that's why you see that cutoff date of September of 2017 in there.
I'm not trying to draw this out. I just don't want to keep rolling this over board meeting to board meeting and keep coming back to this if there's an opportunity to move forward with this and either go one direction or the other. That's all.
I will say, Mr. Chair, in responding a little bit more to your question that you asked me, this rule is actually modeled after a rule that this board developed It's the remedy for incomplete licensure rule.
Mhm.
That rule basically allows y'all to waive anything that's not statutorily, constitutionally required, or required by BHEC if the applicant was unable to complete that requirement due to a declared disaster. Y'all
Gotcha.
remember, y'all developed that rule.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, MFT board has already proposed, they took y'all's rule, copied it exactly, and they are sending it up as well. So we're already kind of working towards some uniformity. So I developed this rule off of that rule.
I'll just say, knowing that we're headed towards uniformity, knowing the work that's gone into this rule, that we are gonna need something that gives us some discretion. I feel like we have an opportunity in front of us to fix it. So I'll just say that. It's obvious. I know there's some very firm opinions on this, but I think we ought to be making a decision on this.
Mr. Blamowitz, are you entertaining motions?
I am entertaining motions, Mr. Bridges.
I'll make the motion to accept.
It's been moved to accept by Mr. Bridges. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Dr. Fletcher. I'm gonna go with a record vote on this. Just go down the roster. So it's been moved and seconded to accept. Dr. Palomares?
Nay.
Mr. Adler?
Yes.
Mr. Bridges?
Yes.
Dr. Fletcher?
Yes.
Dr. Becker?
Yes.
Dr. Calhoun? You have Dr. Calhoun?
Mute your mic, please.
Nay.
Nay. Dr. Singh?
Nay.
Mr. Zaguris?
Yes.
The ayes being 5, the nays being 3, the motion carries. So thank you for the discussion, everybody. I appreciate how it was conducted. And I'm glad that that discussion was held for everybody to see here in the public. Moving on, I got to get back to our agenda. I've lost my place.
Time for break?
Actually, yeah,
for
thank
short
you.
break?
It is time. We went past where I wanted to. So let's do a, you guys want to do, it's 12:19. You want to come back at 12, I'm sorry, it's 12:20. Let's come back at 12:30 and we'll see everybody then. We'll stand at ease till then. All right, the time is 12:30 and we're back in session. Quorum is present. We just did the Rules Committee 7D of the agenda, and we are going to go back to 7A. Does that any objections there from members or staff? All right, hearing none, we're on 7A. The Applications Committee. We have I think 2 items that we are considering there. The first being an appeal of application denial. Patrick, did you want to tee us up on this, or did one of our
I'll do it.
members want to? Okay, great, go for it.
First one we have is we are revisiting Dr. Stanley. Dr. Stanley has an issue with her internship that she didn't meet B, where the supervisor wasn't there 20 hours a week. Problem with C, there weren't 2 or more full-time psychologists on staff. And there was not another internship level trainee there at the same time.
So just to recap, I guess, from last meeting, it felt like after examining this issue, my feeling was that there was enough consensus to table it, to look at the rules to see what we could do. I see, Daryl, are we taking public comment on this? I see somebody raising their hand right now.
No, we're not taking public comment. You do have, I think Dr. Stanley and her attorney are here if you have questions or you need to hear from them.
Gotcha. So what concerns after the discussion from last meeting? Is there anything else here that needs to be aired out or debated or discussed from any members of the board?
Well, I would like to add, I mean, just to the summary that Mr. Bridges did, I think was great. It goes back to that internship, not meeting those 3 components to it. I think there are important components to an internship experience. And I know that there's been she's submitted letters of support and others. She has been working as an LPC this entire time. So I think it's hard to say, well, she's qualified as a licensed psychologist, or she's not qualified, but she is licensed, she's qualified and she is providing services in her area as an LPC. But she hasn't been practicing as a psychologist since her graduation. So again, I think there are some concerns for me of trying to equate that, well, this is an individual who has been practicing in the field for several years. She's been doing great. She has these letters of support and everything to show how the services that she provided. And I would say, yes, I think that's great, and it's wonderful that she has that support, but it's of her services that she's providing as a licensed professional counselor, not as a psychologist. And so it is different to some degree. But I do come back to this part. I think we denied her request last time, and those are the areas that she had not met with her internship.
I don't believe we denied it. I believe we tabled it in light of the rules that we were considering looking at, because we found the impasse in the rule that was not, we were really had painted ourselves into a corner that we would just have to probably blatantly, if we were going to approve her last time, we would have had to pretty blatantly disregard our own rules. Is that accurate, Daryl? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so that is why we had tabled it to revisit it at this meeting from the last one, for that reason.
Oh, so I thought that from reading it that she's reapplied for us to applied for us to reconsider the decision. I knew that we couldn't make a decision last time because of the way the rules are written.
Well, we could have voted to deny it last go around. It's that we didn't really have the discretion to approve it. And in lieu of denying it, we tabled it and then asked for the rule change, or asked the rule proposal.
So with the rule being proposed at this point, it's still not in effect. And therefore, we don't have an option to provide an alternate actions for her to take if the board chooses to provide a waiver. Is that correct?
I'm going to defer to our attorneys on that one. It's a good question.
I'm sorry, I was working on something else. I apologize.
Sorry, we'll save you. So the question is did we just, I'm going back to look at what we just did. Did we propose or did we change the rule just now? Do we have the discretion to even do this at this point? Do we have the discretion with this, or do we need to?
You proposed the rule change up to the council is what you did.
Got it. So if we wanted to, either we could vote to deny, or we would probably punt to see what BHEC does in approving our rule or not before we would do anything on this. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah.
Or we just leave it, no action, to leave it pending? We just put it on the next agenda?
Well, the problem is the rulemaking process takes so long. It'll go to BHEC. BHEC's next meeting is in August. That's when it would be voted to be proposed on. Then it would go to the register. First, it'd have to go to the governor's office. Then it goes to the register. Then it's going to come back to you. So you're probably looking into 2022, or what are we in here? May.
So we could just vote to leave it pending until next, to put it on future agenda closer to that time if we wanted to.
So you want to have an application pending on our docket for that long?
So no, I don't think so. Now that I didn't really think of that.
Do we want to, before a decision is made, Ms. Dalrymple, I see is raise your hand, just give her a couple minutes to address any issues?
I'm not opposed to that. Without opposition. Yep, we can go ahead.
Thank you. I do want to point out that Dr. Stanley has a provisional license. She's a PLP, and she's been practicing with supervision under that PLP since April of 2018. You know, I suppose that she can continue to practice under that provisional license until there is a final decision one way or the other. I don't know what the mechanics of this would be, but I understand why you don't want to leave an application pending sort of indefinitely. You know, one thing that we could do, Patrick and Daryl, perhaps offline, we could talk about maybe withdrawing her appeal for now, and with the provision that she could reinstate it later, because it was timely stated, you know, originally. I don't know how that works, you know, with regard to the process. You know, if Dr. Stanley is not qualified, just when you see her education and her training and her vast experience, and there are people on this board who really think that they're, you know, not having her supervisor on site 20 hours a week, not having another psychologist on site, another 2 psychologists to supervise, and not having another intern there really makes her not be able to provide excellent services today, 10 years later. Then, you know, at that point, the decision is yours. I think anybody that's really gonna really think about this clearly is going to see that those 3 things 10 years ago have no bearing on how she practices today. She's been practicing on her PLP with no problem, no complaints, under supervision. Her supervisor is phenomenal, and he is there in person with her a great deal of the time that she is doing psychological evaluations and assessments and things like that. So, you know, we believe that she is competent. We've provided evidence that she's competent. She passed the ECCC. To me, that seems like that's the last word in competency, not an internship that was done 10 years ago. If you still had the oral exam, that'd be one thing, but you don't. So
Understood.
ECCC, which she passed, is you know, that's kind of the most recent confirmation that this lady is well educated and well trained and able to provide these services safely.
Thank you, Ms. Dalrymple. Okay, so it sounds like no action's needed on this for right now. Is there any reason we should prevent going to the next one at this point from any of our attorneys? All right, let's go ahead and.
John, before you move on, can I just
Yeah.
ask a question? That's our only option? I just want to ask Daryl and Patrick this. That's our only option, is to table it at this point in time?
Y'all like asking hard questions.
I have, that's my one right now.
Yeah. You could deny her. That's one option. I wouldn't want to see that right now. A denial doesn't get reported to NPDB. A denial under these circumstances doesn't get reported to NPDB. So that wouldn't haunt her. But I know that sometimes denials do haunt applicants if they try to apply in another jurisdiction. And I don't want to see somebody tagged with a denial based on this kind of stuff, really. if she chose to get licensed, because she's out in Texarkana, if I'm not mistaken, which means she very well could get licensed in Arkansas or Louisiana, and I don't want to jeopardize somebody's ability to jump across the Sabine if they need to. The only options that I can give to you, Dr. Fletcher, are either denial or table it. That's the only thing that Patrick and I and John and I can tell you that the options are right now. That's really all I can say.
Yep.
Okay.
I would like to submit my second motion to table this.
It's been moved to table. Is there a
I would
second?
second it.
Seconded by Dr. Fletcher. All in favor of tabling, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say
Aye.
no. And with the ayes have it, so we've tabled it. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next application.
I'll tell you, Mr. Chair,
Yep.
we'll get with the applicant and her attorney and kind of see. We'll discuss with them.
Yeah.
Afterwards and see if we can't
Sounds good.
get some kind of resolution worked out.
Sounds good. Oh gosh, I lost my place.
On this next one, we have consideration of a gap of 10 years upon the application and the receiving the degree.
And this is Dr. Franklin.
Yes, sir. Dr. Tenga Franklin.
Got it.
So if I could provide some of this, because as part of the application committee, we reviewed this and decided that it may be better to come to the entire board rather than making a recommendation from the application committee itself to begin with. So this individual had finished her internship in August of 2009, so over 10 years ago, completed a postdoc in March of 2011. So again, 10 years ago. She attempted the EPPP 19 times between December 2013 to November 20, and she finally passed it this past November on the 19th trial. Our concerns are that, and there are a number of reasons and issues that had been going on with this individual as well that prevented some various things, and you have seen those in the application there. But I think part of the concern was now that this individual has finally passed the EPPP, is looking to apply for practice. We had some concerns about professional development needs before licensure. Since the individual has been out of the classroom for more than 10 years, we really see where that set standard or belief that in 10 years, knowledge and training has really advanced, has major advances. In reviewing the application and the information that the applicant provided, she reported attending 3 workshops in 2014 and then an additional one, a 4th one in 2015. And the remainder of the time that she spent between her graduation in August of 2009 and today has been really taking courses to prepare for passing the EPPP. And so the concerns is where I, when I was reviewing this and wanted to hear information and thoughts from other board members, the entire board, is really, is there a need for additional professional development for this individual to present with prior to us approving this application? What are some thoughts that others have on this? I think one could argue that saying, well, preparing and passing the EPPP keeps you updated to current practice issues. I'm not sure if I would say that's the case, but I wanted to really, as one member of the applications committee, wanted to bring this forward for the entire board to think about and to consider and review and discuss.
The courses that she's been taking to prepare for the licensure, I would say, to prepare for the test could be considered as continued education. You're going over material that's current, that is going to be on the test. And so therefore, I believe her studying, her preparation for the EPPP, doesn't matter if she flunked it 19 times, she finally passed it.
Mr. Chair, I think we have this applicant here. Probably before we get too much into the debate on the applicant, we need to hear from them. We usually give them up to 10 minutes.
Sounds good. And we can ask questions if we'd like to, correct?
Yes, it's
Okay.
it's wide open. Dr. Franklin, if you'll raise your hand so that Ms. Moore can find you in the attendee list and then get you over here if you want to talk.
One moment. Mr. Franklin?
Miss Franklin? Hello?
Hello, Dr. Franklin.
Yes, you can't hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, hi, thank you guys.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak and allow me to come today. Yes, as the guy said, I think he was Ronald, I've had some life challenges that slowed me down in my pursuit of passing the EPPP. In 2014, my husband went on dialysis. In 2015, I suffered a heart attack. In 2015, my husband got a kidney transplant. And none of this stopped me, although it did slow me down in, of course, concentrating for the EPPP and all of that. So those life events did have a major impact. But even with that, I was able to continue to pay for workshops, seminars with the major preparation companies. I was involved in study groups. I paid for individual consultation, coaching, tutoring, I used every resource I could to pass the EPPP. I would have loved to have done it, 1 or 2 times and in the 7 years, but I couldn't. But I was just determined that even with that, I could, I wanted to continue to meet that goal. And the workshops, the seminars, I did join Fort Worth Psychological Association, Dallas Psychological Association. I took workshops on the DSM, doing whatever I could for professional development. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing your story. Any questions? Dr. Franklin, I'll just say your story reminds me of something I used to write on I wrote it down and kept it on my desk for years, and that failure is only the definition of having tried for the last time. And so long as you try tomorrow, failure is impossible. So anyway, your story just reminded me of that. So thank you for coming and talking to us. Any discussion?
I just wanted to say that I commend her for trying for 19 times. I don't know if I would have done that, but when you pass, you pass. So as far as I'm concerned, she passed the exam.
John, John Bridges, is the issue we're dealing with here, it's a gap rule?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is that the only issue?
That's the only issue.
Okay.
And we have the authority to waive that, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Entertain motions.
I move that we grant the lady a waiver.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
It sounds like a few seconds, and we're doing this by video now, so let the record show the seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Thank you, Dr. Franklin. Moving
all I
on. Is that is the end of committee report? Hang on, I take that back. We're moving on to the compliance committee and review of compliance with the agreed orders. Dr. Fletcher and Dr. Singh, is there anything to report there?
No. I have nothing.
Okay. Very good. We've done rules. Now we would go to section 8, review of public comments, TSBP, social media use and electronic communications guidelines. And I'm going to get to that.
Can we just back up? Did we skip the jurisprudence exam committee?
I may have. I think I did. Yes, I did. I was looking for subsections. Do you have anything to report there, Dr. Fletcher? Thank you for,
I do not, but
catching me.
thank you for asking me.
Okay. Got to dot our I's and cross our T's. So thank you for catching me there. Okay, and so we have done rules. I take that back. Did we do D2, rules published in the Texas Register awaiting adoption recommendations? That is, I guess, what we already took action on, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there's nothing else there. So now we're on to number 8, the social media use. So we've got, yeah, did you guys get a chance to review the public comment? Does anybody have any discussion points on this? So we would need to adopt this or send it back for editing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Daryl's nodding his head. There was some negative comments here that I wouldn't mind seeing some of these things addressed. Is there any urgency of delaying this another meeting to incorporate some of these comments?
No urgency. And remember, these are not rules. They're not enforceable. They're guidelines to help keep people out of trouble.
Yeah.
They're just kind of the safest course of action, a safe harbor, if you will.
I feel like based on some of the comments, I feel like there's probably room for improvement, and I appreciate the public weighing in on this, just for some clarity. So maybe we'll revisit this again in the next meeting with some of these edits, maybe wordsmith and changed a little bit. Unless anybody has any other ideas.
I think perhaps it might be helpful to use some tools for drawing folks' attention to definitions, because I think perhaps folks might have misread this statement based on the public comment, which is, had we read more carefully, I think people perceived the definition of social media to included social communication. However, we actually have 2 different definitions in the same sentence. So I think we either need to edit that and make it 2 separate sentences so that folks can be very binary and understand that these are 2 separate ideas. Or
Right.
Perhaps we can underline in bold and draw folks' attention to the fact that those are 2 separate definitions. Because I think it just got embedded and folks didn't draw it out. We just saw the first thing and had a little bit of a recency effect with it.
Yeah. So let's, that actually probably dovetails into our next one in terms of recommendations for agenda items on the next board meeting. I think we'll put this one back on there, maybe with some edits to get this thing ready for prime time. And again, to the public out there, we appreciate you commenting on it. Y'all, the participation of the public always is going to end us up with a better work product at the end, and it's noted and appreciated. So with that, are there any more recommendations for agenda items for the next board meeting? If you guys come up with anything between now and then, oh, go ahead. Yep.
Thank you. I just want to ask whether or not in the complaint process, it appears to be limited to evaluations for forensics. Is there an opportunity for us to have further discussion related to other kinds of services like therapy, other kinds of evaluations besides child custody evaluations? Is there a need as a member of the standardization committee through BHEC? I'm just wondering whether or not we have legally covered everything with the complaint process rather than just addressing it in terms of evaluations. So if a court-appointed therapist has a complaint, the same process is already in place? That's a question.
I'm not qualified to answer.
No, that the rule that governs complaints involving court-ordered evaluations would not apply to a court-ordered therapist.
Is there an opportunity on our next agenda to put it as a future item to discuss how that process has benefited the efficiency of the complaint process in the area of evaluations and how that could be broadened in other areas, not just forensically related, but I know that it's specific to making sure the court orders and all of that are provided by the person making the complaint. I'm just wondering if we can broaden that beyond just that one appointed role.
You could, but that's really a BHEC role. That's really something the council handles and not the boards, because you're talking about the enforcement process itself, which is exclusively within the council's wheelhouse.
So it's a future item for BHEC versus us.
Correct. Now, there's nothing saying it can't start here. I mean, you could certainly have the discussion here if y'all are seeing a problem. And then once you've articulated it, kind of defined what the problem is, then you or John can carry it up to the council easily. So you don't have to start up there if you don't want to. I'm just saying y'all won't be voting on anything. You'll then just carry it up.
Okay, I just saw the value in the discussion we had as a board about this issue to get to some of the changes in the complaint process that are already enacted and the education that occurred at this board level in order to be able to understand the discussion items that needed to be had. So what I'm hearing is that it's an option to talk about it at the board level at TSBEP, but the appropriate channel is to do that at the BHEC level.
Correct.
Okay.
Very good.
So do you want it on the psych board's next agenda?
No, we have a lot on our plate on this board.
Okay.
You're welcome. The plate, there's a lot on the plate with BHEC, but it's part of the questions about standardization that as a member of that committee, I just am invested in hearing comments related to that. And so, but I do think it's okay to go ahead and just deal with it at the BHEC level.
I think that's probably a good topic for the standardization committee. In fact, I'll go ahead and add it to the list of things that we probably ought to be talking about.
Okay.
Let's let y'all bounce it around in that committee and see what y'all say.
Okay, I just was eliciting the wisdom of this crowd here, but I do agree with you. The proper channel is within that committee.
Very good. Anything else? All right, that brings us to item 10, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Unless there's anything else, final call. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded to adjourn without objection. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys for all your help and participation. Have a great day,
everyone. Have a good day.
You guys and the public. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.